Mornings. Showers, though, from the word go across the north and the west, and through the day it's generally a case of sunny spells and scattered showers. Some of the showers could be on the heavy side, but there'll be lots of places that stay dry and enjoy some afternoon sunshine, though the cloud will bubble up, and temperatures similar to recent days, generally the high teens to low 20s, highs around 22 Celsius towards the southeast. Into Thursday, a bright day across the north and east of the UK, some sunny spells, 1 or 2 showers, but across the west and south, outbreaks of rain pushing in here, which will turn increasingly heavy, and that looks like it will hang around on Friday, but then turning much drier and brighter as we head into Saturday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, months after Nadine Dorries actually resigned, guess what, brace yourself, she seems to have actually followed through and resigned. In her letter, she has absolutely battered Rishi Sunak and beyond. Did you read it? Do you agree with her approach? What is wrong with the Tories? Why do they want to create so much damage to to themselves. And post-Brexit border checks have been delayed for the 5th time in a row. Do you think that Brexit will ever get done or not? And get this, alcohol-related deaths are at a 14-year high. I'm asking you a simple question. Do you think we have a drink problem? And clean air zones, whatever you call them, they are a cash cow to some, an essential health policy to others. As ULEZ expands across London today, we've got an interview with none other than Sadiq Khan to explain his thinking behind it all. But do not be mistaken, this is not just a London thing, whatever you call them, LEZ, CAS, clean air zones, whatever. These things are happening up and down the country. Is your town going to be next? If so, would you support them? We've got it all to come and more, but before we get into it, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you very much, and good evening. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Mayor of London says he's sorry for anyone who's suffering adverse consequences because of his policies. Speaking to GB News, Sadiq Khan said the expanded ULEZ policy is essential to protect the health of people living in the capital.
Listen, I'm always sorry for anybody who's suffering adverse consequences because of our policies, but at the same time, I've got to be honest with people and say I've been meeting bereaved mums who've lost their children because of air pollution. I've been meeting a paediatrician today who works with mums who are pregnant, suffering the ill consequences because of air pollution, and babies who are born suffering the ill consequences. I've met today a doctor who runs an asthma clinic, but also I visited Great Ormond Street, the inpatient ward at the Children's Evelina Hospital. I met scientists, health practitioners and others. That's why I'm angry that the government's letting down London and the South East.
You can see more of that interview with the London Mayor here on GB News coming up at 6:30. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the Mayor's decision is in poor taste.
People and families are struggling with the cost of living. That's obvious to everyone. And at that time, the Labour Party, the Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer are introducing the ULEZ charge, which is going to hit working families. I don't think that's the right priority. I don't think that's the right thing to do, and I wish they had not done it.
GB News can reveal at least 20,000 people have crossed the English Channel so far this year. Official Home Office figures show that up until yesterday, 19,800 migrants had arrived in small boats. However, GB sources reveal up to 300 migrants being brought into Dover Harbour on Border Force vessels today brings that total so far this year over 20,000. It's understood they crossed the Channel in at least 6 dinghies. That comes as the government insists it's stopping the boats. Tens of thousands of airline passengers have seen their flights cancelled today due to the knock-on effects of an air traffic control fault. Analysis of flight data shows at least 281 flights have been cancelled at the UK's 6th busiest airports, with Gatwick and Heathrow hit worst. The Transport Secretary told GB News an independent review will take place into how the technical problem began. Mark Harper also says he's in touch with the airlines. The funeral of Russian mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin was held privately at a cemetery in St. Petersburg. That's according to his press office. Secrecy had surrounded the funeral arrangements for Prigozhin, who was killed in that plane crash 2 months after staging a mutiny against Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin had said earlier that the Russian president would not be attending the funeral. The way in which the Notting Hill Carnival is run and policed is being reviewed after 8 stabbings at the event last night. One 29-year-old man is still in a critical condition after he was stabbed on the northern fringes of the carnival. An hour earlier, a 19-year-old man was stabbed and seriously injured on Ladbroke Grove in the heart of the carnival area. 6 others were also stabbed but didn't suffer life-threatening injuries. There were 275 arrests across the 2-day event. Sir Ed Davey says only the Liberal Democrats can win against the Tories in the usually safe seat of Mid-Bedfordshire. The Lib Dems are challenging Labour's effort to take Nadine Dorries' old seat after her resignation at the weekend. The Prime Minister says he's looking forward to supporting his party's new candidate. But Sir Ed Davey says he's confident his party will take the seat.
The Liberal Democrats are clearly the challengers to the Conservatives here in mid-Bedfordshire. We've seen that knocking on doors. I've talked to a lot of people, including Labour Party members, who are going to vote for the Liberal Democrats because they know that only the Liberal Democrats can beat the Conservatives in a seat like this, which is a very rural, it's what I've called a blue wall seat. So I think when people wake up after the election, they'll either have a Conservative MP or a Liberal Democrat MP.
And relaxing environmental rules will help lead to the construction of 100,000 new homes in England by 2030, according to the Prime Minister. EU-era restrictions currently mean house builders must consider the impact new developments may have on rivers and waterways. Labour's Shadow Housing Secretary Lisa Nandy says the government's failing on both housing and the environment. But Rishi Sunak argues the plan will be good for first home buyers and boosting the economy. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now it's back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Tatiana. I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, a new face to the panel. We like those, don't we? Businessman and motivational speaker, Gerald Ratner. Good evening. Welcome.
Hi, Michelle.
And one of our old favourites, you know what it is, PR consultant Alex Dean. I used to have you on a Friday and everyone always messages to say, I like Alex with his pint on a Friday. They miss you.
You want to give me one tonight? I'd take it.
I know. I think he would take it as well. But no, I have a no drinking till Friday rule on this programme. I'm a very sensible individual, not least because I am asking a little bit later on in the programme whether or not we, us Brits, have a drink problem. Deaths from alcohol is apparently at a 14-year high in some places. Do you drink too much? Do you think, oh, shut up whinging about alcohol, stop being nanny state, gone mad? Get in touch with all of your thoughts tonight on anything that you want. gbviews@gbnews.com is how you reach me on the email, or you could tweet me at gbnews. Fair, sir, I do want to kick off. In fact, actually, before I get into the script and what I'm doing, that traffic control situation, those people stranded, it's really awful. It makes me wonder, we're getting so reliant now on technology. You know, is this just a sign of things to come? When technology fails, the impact is immense.
I think I disagree, actually. The thing about this situation for me is that 99.9% of the time, these systems work flawlessly and nobody notices. Right? So it's only when something like this happens that people even think about this function. But the most important thing in air traffic control is obvious, it's safety. And as soon as something's gone a little wrong, they are right to pull back. And, you know, it's sad and frustrating if you can't fly somewhere, but God, it's better than the alternative, continuing flights when something may go wrong. Actually, I really respect the people who run these systems.
Do you?
I do.
Are you stuck in an airport watching me on your telephone or something? Are you shouting, saying you don't respect the people that run these systems? Get in touch, let me know. What do you think? Is this technology gone mad or what?
I don't agree. I think that NATS should pay for this. I think that the distress that they cause... I mean, we've all been in airports stuck and delayed, and it's a terrible, terrible situation because you've got no control over it. You're treated like cattle. Now, we always hear about people getting bonuses for achievement. This is an absolute disaster, what happened, and the anxiety and the stress that it caused all those people and families was awful. And somebody, they always get bonuses when things go wrong, so they should be fined when things, you know, go bad.
Well, compensation fair enough. To get back in,
no, just say compensation fair enough. That absolutely, that's a separate point in my view. My point was simply that if systems look like they're not going to work, you shouldn't fly.
Well, there you go. Get your thoughts coming in. Have you been impacted by that? Do you know anyone that is? A little bit off topic there. I wasn't supposed to be covering that, but couldn't help myself when I heard it in the news. Nadine Dorries, you'll remember her, of course. She resigned, and I say it with a bit of a wry smile because she apparently resigned 2.5 months ago, didn't she? And didn't go anywhere very fast at all. But she has now actually formally resigned with a really, I would say, damning resignation letter. I've got it, I printed it out, and in preparation for the show today, I started highlighting the bits that I thought were kind of made me go like, ooh, ooh. And then I realised it was pretty much the entire thing. So I just stopped highlighting it because all of it, I don't know if you've actually seen it or read it. I'll describe some of the best bits in a minute. You want to read it through your fingers, basically, because it is so damning. And I mean, literally, I would say the whole thing is about 3 pages long. But she's basically saying, I'm paraphrasing here, but she's basically saying that Rishi Sunak is a bit of a jerk, that there is a democratic deficit, there is a zombie government that's basically been happening, a zombie parliament. She talks about political assassinations and dark forces. Why are the Tories doing this to themselves?
Well, that last question is a very good one. I always hate blue on blue. But look, I have a position on this that will please nobody. Point one, I rather like Nadine Dorries. I've known her a long time, and I think I rather like her, which 99% of people will immediately switch off. But number two, I don't think she should have sent this letter, for 2 reasons, really. The first is that the longer you make something like this, the less impact it has. I mean, it's just this redolent of the kitchen sink, and another thing that I don't like, and another thing that I don't like. And in the end, I think you come across as bitter, and she's better, in my view at least, she's better than that. But the second reason is to do with your blue on blue thing. People don't get elected because they are Nadine Dorries, or for that matter, because they're Rishi Sunak. They get elected because they've got a blue rosette on or a red rosette on. And in the end, you owe the party that got you elected a good deal more loyalty than is on show, not just with this example, but basically across the political board.
Gerald?
Well, reading her letter, it was rather a tribute to herself. Normally, I think you should rely on somebody else to do that. She was talking about what a great culture secretary she was, which I think a lot of people would disagree on that. She's a publicity seeker, and she doesn't like anybody. The only person she likes is Boris. She hated David Cameron because he told her to calm down, and she said, I'm not going to take this from... And she had a go at George Osborne as well. She said, I'm not going to take this from 2 rich boys from Eton. So she didn't like them. She didn't like any of the prime ministers that followed in terms of Theresa May or Liz Truss. It was only Boris, which tells you something about her. And I think that she's got a point in terms of the Tory party being broken. I think that they realise it's broken at the moment. I don't think they're happy.
But they've broken it. They've done this. I mean, how anyone can go from what Boris Johnson achieved to the absolute shambles that they've made it is beyond me.
Well, it's certainly an uphill struggle at the next election, because, of course, in 2019, the 3 big factors, basically, were Boris, Brexit and Corbyn, and none of those factors will apply at the next election. So it's going to be more difficult for the Conservative Party, no argument about that. But actually, your point about why do this if the party's in trouble applies both ways. I say, plainly, Nadine Dorries is not in a happy place. I don't believe in kicking someone when they're down. If you accept her premise and the Prime Minister is in trouble and not doing well, then don't send in a resignation letter like this.
Why is she not in a happy place?
Well, plainly, she's not on board with what's happened since Boris Johnson went as Prime Minister. And you know what? I was the last Japanese soldier on my jungle island defending Boris Johnson as PM. I did morning TV saying you shouldn't resign when he resigned like an hour later. But we are where we are. And I think Rishi Sunak's doing pretty well as Prime Minister, and far better than people expected in the political cycle a few months ago.
Yeah, but it is self-inflicted, and she's right about that. As you say, Michelle, I could believe that Boris came in with this huge majority, and that is gone for one reason only. And the reason he got that majority was because of Brexit, which I know we're going to talk about later.
Yeah, we are.
Because they all backed him for getting us out of Europe. That situation now has changed dramatically. So all those people in that red wall are not going to vote Tory next time around. And they've shot themselves in the foot completely.
It wasn't just one factor. There was another one which was beyond the gift of the Conservative Party, which was, rightly or wrongly, and there'll be some people, even watching GB News, who disagree, but a wide view in this country was that Jeremy Corbyn was not a plausible candidate to be Prime Minister. So that factor has been taken away from the electoral calculus, and its shift is reflected in the polls.
Yeah, but Keir Starmer is going to win this election by actually taking on Tory policies.
Well, you make an interesting point, because she says in this letter, and if you've not seen it, by the way, it's widely available now all over the internet.
Which chapter of the letter do you want us to turn to?
The final, second to last paragraph, she says, basically, you have abandoned the fundamental principles of conservatism, and history will not judge you kindly. So the point that Gerald makes there is an interesting one, which is actually some people will say that the Conservatives are no longer the Conservatives, and actually some of the other parties, whether it's Reform or whoever, they are now filling that void.
No, look, I mean, that part of her letter, and I've been as kind as I can, but I think that part of her letter is basically ridiculous. Plainly, this government wants to lower tax, even if it's not doing as much as it could or, in my view, should. But, you know, just try the other lot to see, nobody prefers those acts to the real. There's no point in the Tory party trying to pretend to be left-wing. The Labour Party will always outbid you. There's no point in the Labour Party pretending to be on your side as a taxpayer or saying they're going to cut taxes and shrink the size of the state, because they never will.
And you say you know Nadine and she's a nice person and she's a bit sad. I don't know Nadine, but I'm not surprised that she's sad. I think she's a jumped-up, self-entitled individual, and the reason that she's sad is because she believes that she deserves this place in the House of Lords, and all of this is her kicking off like a petulant child because she didn't get that entitlement, and I think that is embarrassing.
It's Macbeth, isn't it, where everything... Oh, no, it's Othello, where everything kicks off because Iago isn't given the title that he wants to murderous ends. For me, nobody is entitled to go to the House of Lords. I know we've been showering peerages like confetti, such that, the three of us must feel that between us there's something gone wrong because none of us three have got a peerage yet. It must only be a matter of time, surely. But actually, nobody's entitled to a peerage. It's one of the greatest honours this country can bestow. And throwing your toys out of the pram because you didn't get one, to me, seems absurd.
And another by-election then will be on the way. Do you think the Tories can secure it or not?
I think they'll lose it. I cannot see how... I think, firstly, the only reason they held on to Uxbridge, and that's another thing we're talking about, is the ULEZ. I think that otherwise, if you looked at the other by-elections, they got slaughtered. So there's no reason... The ULEZ is not an issue in this one. And I also think there's a lot of hostility against Nadine Dorries locally, the way that she disappeared for so long.
Well,
so
she says, again, I mean, this really is a fascinating letter. She basically says that she has been busy serving her constituents and dealing with their stuff. She's a very proud person of her job and her history and all the rest of it. She says that the Prime Minister and a lot of the media have basically done a bit of a witch hunt against her. Lastly, because I'm just conscious of time, I've got a lot to discuss tonight, she's saying that there is this kind of these dark forces at play that are kind of being very undemocratic. Do you agree with that?
Look, it's so easy in any political environment to say, oh, the Illuminati, the man is out to get us, there's a great conspiracy. And by the way, these vaccines, I'm not sure about whether they were given us for our health or for mind control. And have you noticed all these chemtrails, by the way? In the end, it's so easy to disappear down a conspiracy theory track. Normally, politics is judged and run by cock-up, not by conspiracy.
Is that fair?
I think it's a fair point. There's some truth in that, and it's a really sad situation. As a Tory voter myself all my life, I can't get myself to vote Tory this time because of this whole... As one Nadine Dorries...
Is there anything they could do to win back your vote at the next election? Because there's a long time between now and then.
Well, Sunak's doing all the right things. I mean, he's doing his best. But I think that... it's been such a cock-up, as you say, over the last 10 or 11 years.
I think there's a lot of people who think what you just said, Sunak's doing all the right things, and I think they're going to do better than people are expecting.
Well, Nadine Dorries, in her letter, she says, she says, since you took office a year ago, the country has been run by a zombie parliament where nothing meaningful has happened. What exactly has been done, or what exactly have you achieved? She goes on about basically how he holds office unelected and so on and so forth. Another thing I didn't get a chance to rant about, one of the problems I think that's happening with a lot of MPs at the moment, they think they're mini celebrities. They're going off on these daft reality TV shows whilst you're still serving your constituents, apparently, and you're eating kangaroo bits and pieces in jungles, you're writing books, you've got your own TV shows. That, if you ask me, is part of the decline of our political system. Anyway, get your thoughts in and let me know what you think about some of that. I want to talk Brexit after the break, because we've got checks now being delayed for the 5th time. What on earth is going on? Will Brexit ever get done? Will we ever be able to move on and turn the page? You tell me.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside me the businessman and motivational speaker Gerald Ratner and the PR consultant Alex Dean. We've just been talking about Nadine Dorries and whether or not her resignation letter, very long, was a positive thing for the Tories or not. Nadine Dorries, I don't know if she's been paying you guys to write in tonight, but cool, blimey, your support for Nadine is unwavering. You're saying, I do not agree with you, Michelle. Nadine Dorries' resignation letter accurately criticises Sunak for all the right reasons. David says, Linda again, she agrees with Nadine. David is saying that you agree. Lots of you, actually. I'm just trying to look for someone who doesn't actually agree. Pete says, I'm a Conservative, but I will never vote the Tories again. They've abandoned every principle of conservatism over the last decade. The tax is the highest it has been for decades. Good on. Nadine, though, says, Nomis, freedom of speech is great, and she has the inside track. I've got to say, lots and lots and lots of you supporting Nadine Dorries out there. I'll leave you to have the final thought and the final word on it while I move on to Brexit. I had hoped that by now in life Brexit wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even a point of discussion. But no, we are still talking about it. The reason why is because we're supposed to have had post-Brexit checks now introduced on things like food and plant and animal produce, which is arriving into the UK. But it has been delayed again, this time for a 5th time. And it gets me thinking, because we've got these checks in the opposite direction. So it's the checks on goods coming into here that we can't seem to get our house in order and sort out, Alex. Will we ever get Brexit done?
Well, in my view, that's looking at it through the wrong lens, because Brexit itself, our ability to decide things for ourselves, that has been done. What you do and the decisions you take, that's a process that will be with us as an independent and sovereign country, hopefully at least, for the rest of my life and well beyond. So, you know, every time we do a new trade deal that we couldn't have done whilst a member of the European Union will be an aspect of Brexit on your test. And people would say, well, won't Brexit ever be finished? Well, we've done one with India, or when we do one with Pakistan, isn't Brexit going to be finished? In the same way, on this, we have the ability to decide for ourselves how we implement restrictions on goods coming into this country, bearing in mind the fact that...
What's taken us so long then?
Well,
because the EU have figured out their side since January 2021.
Because government has consulted with business, which has told, and traders have told government they need more time to prepare for what's going to happen. And indeed, furthermore, when you put restrictions... Hang on, you asked me a question. When you put restrictions on... Yes, but then we didn't actually implement Brexit for reasons we can discuss for some time after the vote. When you impose new restrictions on things coming into a country, it can have an inflationary effect, and the people who will often pay more for it are the consumers of those products. So actually, imposing more restrictions on something may not necessarily be in consumers' interests. So government is right to tread cautiously on this. And one-way tariffs, well, that's just the way of the world. We're entitled to zero-rate things or not impose further restrictions on things, even if the other side does, because it's often in the consumer's interest.
Optimism from Alex. Do you share that?
Well, I don't know, really. To be honest with you, I don't know whether Brexit was a good thing or not a good thing. I mean, I went to vote with my son. I thought, well, it's going to be a whole pain in the neck to get out of Brexit. It's like going through a divorce. And sometimes, you know, you're in a marriage, which is no good, and you think, well, should I get divorced? I can't be bothered with all of this because I'm going to lose my house and all that. And there's so much disruption. And this is the main thing. I don't think anyone knows whether Brexit is good or bad. I think it's a 10-year thing to really discover that. But I do know that in the meanwhile, we've got a hell of a lot of disruption, and the Northern Ireland thing will never, I can't see how that ever will be resolved. And we've got enough problems.
But what disruption have we got? Well, because everything gets blamed on Brexit. If I sneezed and I had a nosebleed, there'd be someone in the vicinity that would somehow link that and connect that to Brexit.
Well, Brexit, the reason that people voted for Brexit, let's be honest, is one thing, is immigration. We had too much immigration. So what's happened since Brexit? We've got exactly the same immigration. We just replaced it with EU immigrants. We've replaced them with non-EU immigrants. That's the only difference.
Oh.
So that's why...
Gerald, I voted for Brexit, and I didn't vote for Brexit over immigration. I voted for us to be able to make sovereign decisions for ourselves rather than having those decisions made elsewhere. And that, by the way, from my view, might be a more liberal perspective on migration, which would be my perspective, for example, when it comes to a trade deal with India, where you can identify the people coming, they come for stated purposes and reasons, with stated qualifications as required by our government. I'd be in favour of more of that, not less.
But loads of people did vote. Loads of people in their towns and cities, they saw immigration having changed their town and cities. In some cases, wage depression because of things like the expansion into the the Eastern Bloc, where you got all of your cheaper plumbers, etc., coming in. So it was a big factor for a lot of people.
Of course, it was a big factor, and that's a fair point. But that wasn't what Gerald said. He said that, let's be honest, the reason people voted for Brexit was that. Whereas, as a matter of fact, as in any big decision, like voting for a government, there are a coalition of people motivated by different things came together. I'm much more on the free trade libertarian end of those things. But yes, I formed common cause with people who wanted restrictions to be used and implemented in different ways. But the common feature of that was the belief that the decision about what we do on it should sit with us and not with someone else.
Do you see any opportunity in Brexit? Do you look at it and go, yes, this new landscape, you're an entrepreneur, let me capitalise?
Well, no, exactly the opposite, actually. But the thing I do like is that we have got rid of another layer of politicians, MEPs. You had people like Kinnock and his whole family on this gravy train. And I don't know why we keep having to add layers of politicians. You know, when I was young, we just had the House of Lords and the House of Commons. Now we've got the Scottish Assembly, the Welsh Assembly, the Irish Assembly is not sitting. We've got various police commissioners. We've got mayors. Why do we need... We never had mayors. Why do we keep
to bring democracy closer to the people, to let people have more influence and control over what happens in their close proximity?
Yeah, but you don't do that by having more sheriffs than cowboys. I mean, it's just getting... Why do we keep having to add more bureaucracy? So one of the things I do like about Brexit is we don't have to pay those MEPs any longer.
But what I do think is an interesting challenge is that the government will need to have something to show by the next election and say, this is something concrete that we've delivered. And whether, you think the principles I'm talking about sovereignty are important or not. I accept pragmatically you need to have something to say, look, there it is, we've delivered something that you wouldn't have had without Brexit. And for me, it's probably the thing that's shaping it up to be is going to be the Indian trade deal, because that is not something you'd have been able to sign with your member of the European Union. Now, as it happens, I also think and hope the government desperately needs to have a fix on small boats coming from France, and that's something, Brexit or no Brexit, is going to have an answer to. But on the Brexit challenge of what have you done with these freedoms, you know, biggest democracy in the world, we've got a trade deal with them, that's not a bad outcome.
No, I agree, and that's why I say the jury's out on it, because it's a swings and roundabouts situation. I mean, there are certain things that we're losing. Business investment, for instance, is 10% down because there's a lot of big companies take a view that we've made a big mistake. But it swings and roundabouts.
But how do you know that investment decline, if there is one, is directly linked or because of Brexit?
Because I think it all plays part of this scenario that Britain is going backwards. It's broken Britain. It's all to do with the NHS, the waiting lists, the fact that we spent too much in the pandemic, we got ripped off, the fact that we're now out with the Brexit. I think that all of these things pile on people. There's no pounds, shillings and pence decision. Just people take a view. Business people take a view and they say Britain has made a lot of mistakes and it's not a country that's top of our list for investment. And that wasn't the case 10 years ago. It wasn't even the case 5 years ago.
Is that fair?
No, I'm not sure it is. Look, I mean, obviously, everyone would want waiting lists within the NHS to be lower. It seemed, and indeed that's one of the Prime Minister's 5 key pledges, but it does seem to me that's much more to do with coronavirus and our response to it than anything else. Of course, we turned our NHS into a COVID health system for some enormous period of time, and the backlog mounted up hugely. That was a decision we made for ourselves. That's quite wrongly. It seems quite likely to me that will be the decision of the investigation into COVID when it finally reports back. But that's nothing to do with Brexit.
Well, there you go. What do you make to it? Are you still a passionate Brexiteer? Do you stand by that decision if indeed you made it? Or do you look back all misty-eyed for how life used to be? Get in touch and let me know. After the break, I've got a lot coming your way. I want to talk to you about alcohol. Do we have a drink problem in this country? Also, as well, ULEZ. You don't want to miss it. Sadiq Khan will be explaining himself when it comes to the expansion. But worry not. This is not just a London thing. These clean air zones are popping up all over the place. Do you have one in your town? And if not now, then don't worry. I'm sure it will be heading there soon.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission
of GB News, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside my new face to the show, businessman and motivational speaker Gerald Ratner and the PR consultant Alex Dean. Lots of you getting in touch about those last few topics on Brexit. Christine says, I voted for Brexit because I didn't like a collective of other countries deciding our laws and our way of life. Fred says, I voted for democracy, not unelected people to rule over us. Chris says, I didn't vote solely because of immigration, but lots of other things, including the very large state of the EU, which is not accountable to us. Ian says, if we're now self-governing, how is it then that the EU still seems to dictate what happens, particularly in aspects of things like human rights and everything else? Well, the ECHR is not a part of the EU, so hence we are still in that. Stephen says, I voted Brexit so we can manage all of our country in all of our areas in the way whatever we see fit. There you go. I shall leave that Brexit chat for now because I want to talk to you about booze. Are you a drinker? If so, are you happy with the amounts that you drink? Do you think we, as a country, drink a little bit too much? I'm asking because the number of people in Scotland whose death was caused by alcohol has risen to the highest level in 14 years. It has got me thinking about this, Gerald, because when you look right across the UK, actually, a lot of these figures are increasing when it comes to the amount we're drinking and the challenges that it's bringing us, etc. Where do you stand on it?
Well, I was listening to this interview with the oldest man in Britain whose birthday was 111.
Right.
And they asked him the secret of his longevity, and he said moderation. And I think there is a lot of truth in that. Unfortunately, I cannot really exercise his advice because when I open a bottle of wine, I tend to finish it. I'm enjoying it so much. But you do enjoy it, and it's fabulous while you're drinking it.
But then do you drink daily? So, like, every night would you get home and open your wine?
Well, I try and don't do that because of the fact that I would drink a whole bottle every night. And I would find that if I did that, I wouldn't... I mean, I do mentoring and stuff like that, and you have to have your wits about you. I do my motivational speaking, and that would be affected. There's no question whatsoever. If I drink a bottle of wine a night, you lose your sharpness. So when I'm working, which is sort of perhaps most of the time I wouldn't drink, but at weekends, when I really want to relax, it is very nice to open a bottle of wine, red wine, sit at the end of the garden.
You can see the joy in his face. He's like sitting there and he's getting into it in his own mind.
I'm there.
Yeah, I do as well. I can almost
great.
hear that cork popping.
Sounds super.
Where do you stand on it, Alex?
My first thing is this. Of course, no man is an island, and anybody's death is sad because we are all part of the main. But these are tiny statistics. This is an increase of under 36 people sadly have died. It's a 2% rise on the year prior. So really, these numbers are not huge. And moreover, let me tell you, you can always find the answer that you want to get from statistics. There is a reason that people focus on something like, this is the highest raise since 2008. You know why? Because in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, people drank like fish, right? The greatest generation, the generation that won the war, basically didn't stop drinking and smoking unless they were pulling a trigger, right? So it is absurd sometimes how agonised we get about these things. We drink far less than our grandparents ever did. And in the end, drinking is enjoyable and drinking is something that helps you to relax. So it is very sad that these people have died. And of course, if someone in extremis has developed alcoholism and they need help, then we should try as a society to get them that help. But let's not get things out of proportion.
But alcohol, alcohol has become... So I remember my granddad, he used to make his own wine.
Yeah.
I was obviously too young to drink
did that.
it. Yeah, but I remember like a whole kind of spare bedroom was just dedicated to these humongous glass things that he was brewing God only knows what in there.
Sure.
But now when I think about alcohol, because I drink, obviously, I think most people do, but it is a habit. So when I finish work, and I get home, and then I think, right, now it's time to wind down. So I do then get a glass of wine with my dinner or whatever. But whenever I think I see advertisements, drinking is glamorised. So you will pick up any magazine or whatever, and there's this woman, and she's really beautiful, and she's got her glass of whatever. And I don't know if it is getting to the point where if you've got a problem with alcohol, because I think excessive alcohol is at the root of so many societal issues. I think domestic abuse and things like that. When you actually trace it down, it's somebody that's got a drink problem that's often the kernel, the catalyst for what goes on in that home. I think of a lot of football violence, and there'll be loads of people now having a go at me for being stereotyping. But when I think of a lot of football violence, I think a load of people, they drink too much, they can't handle their beer. And then you see all these grown, sweaty men kicking off when there's all the kids in the stadium. And I think if you ban booze, I bet you'd get rid of a lot of that violence as well.
There's no question about that. I mean, all the NHS always say that they get, in A&E, they get all people coming in after having fights at the weekend from drinking.
Well, I'd bill them. I'd charge them. If you go out and you get drunk and you kick off and now I need an ambulance and 999 and you're going into A&E and you're taking up a bed, when you sober up the next morning, guess what would be waking you up next to your toast? You'd get a bill.
Well, that may be a view that attracts so sympathy amongst viewers, but we believe in carefree at the point of view. So let me just make one point from what you were saying. You were talking about football violence. 8 people got stabbed at Notting Hill Carnival, which are all supposed to say it's a wonderful celebration of culture. That doesn't happen in a season of football in the United Kingdom,
True.
but we pretend it doesn't happen.
That is a very fair point. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Do you drink too much? Do you think we've got a problem? And if so, how do we deal with it? My heart goes out as well, by the way. You talk about alcoholics. My heart goes out to people that have an alcoholic in their family, because the knock-on effect and the impacts of devastation that it causes to the wider family is absolutely immense. I speak from unfortunate experience, I can tell you anyway. I got an exclusive, a fascinating, interesting interview coming your way, because you will be aware that ULEZ, of course, has expanded today. Well, the GBNews political editor, Christopher Hope, our new editor, I have to say, he has been interviewing Sadiq Khan at City Hall. Let's listen to what Sadiq has to say about ULEZ.
Sadiq Khan, why are you expanding the ULEZ in Greater London at the height of a cost of living crisis?
Well, the decision to expand the ultra-emission zone to all of London was a difficult one. It wasn't an easy one, but I think it's a vital decision and it's the right one. Let me tell you why. We now know the evidence in relation to the consequences of air pollution. It leads to around 4,000 premature deaths a year. It leads to children having stunted lungs forever. Adults with a whole host of health issues, from asthma to cancer, dementia to heart disease. We also now know that one of the most effective ways to reduce air pollution is with the ULEZ. How do we know that? In central London, we've seen a reduction of around 50% of toxicity, nitrogen dioxide. Also, a third fewer children being admitted to hospital with air pollution-related illnesses. When we expanded it to inner London, we saw a further reduction of 21% in nitrogen dioxide. Now, children going to 1,400 schools are breathing clean air. Yep. Here's the problem. In outer London is where the 10 boroughs with the largest amount of premature deaths are. It's in outer London where 2/3 of Londoners with respiratory issues live, and it's in outer London where 24 of the 30 GP practices with the worst respiratory problems are. I think clean air is all right, and just like people in central London and in London have seen benefits,
question your figures,
they should out of London.
The Tories question those figures and say it's a money-making exercise.
Let me deal with that. So the same experts that produced the figure that shows around 4,000 premature deaths a year, the same experts that have shown ULEZ to be effective are used by the government. The government commissioned these experts to do work for them, and these experts told the government that between 28,000 and 36,000 people die prematurely in our country as a consequence of air pollution. If these experts are good enough for the government, they're good enough for City Hall.
Do you understand the anger about people living on the outside, on the edge of Greater London? They now can't cross the road or drive across the road to go and get some basic services. And we're seeing some real frustration on GB News today on the channel.
I fully understand the concerns, not just those in outer London may have, but those outside of London.
They get no help at all from your scrappage scheme.
Well, I've been responding to those concerns for those people I'm responsible for in at London. So the government published an air quality directive requiring cities and regions to sort their air out because of consequences of air pollution. The government supported cities around the country and those outside cities with clean air zones like Birmingham and Bristol and Bath. And what I'm saying to people outside of London is your councils have spent more than £1 million taking me to court unsuccessfully. Why don't you work with me and your council to lobby the government to give those in the home counties the same sort of support the government's given those outside Birmingham, those outside Bristol, those outside Bath?
Would you apologise to people who've given them this big charge on getting around, just going to work, you've got to pay £12.50 suddenly?
Listen, I'm always sorry for anybody who's suffering adverse consequences because of our policies, but at the same time, I've got to be honest with people and say I've been meeting bereaved mums who's lost their children because of air pollution. I've been meeting a paediatrician today who works with mums who are pregnant, suffering the ill consequences because of air pollution, and babies who are born suffering the ill consequences. I've met today a doctor who runs an asthma clinic, but also I visited Great Ormond Street, the inpatient ward at the Children's Evelina Hospital. I met scientists, health practitioners and others. That's why I'm angry that the government's letting down London and the South East.
Is now the time? I mean, you say in your book here, Breathe, Tackling the Climate Change Emergency. You say when the going gets tough, the climate gets forgotten. But that's because people have to feed their families. They can't really afford to worry about the climate when it's difficult.
Let me deal with that. In 2017, I brought in the precursor to the ULEZ, which is the toxicity charge. I was told to delay that because the time wasn't right because of Brexit and so forth. In 2019, I brought in the ULEZ in central London. I was told to delay it because of difficulties in central London. But actually, what we know is that central London ULEZ has led to a reduction of almost 50% of toxic air, but also a third fewer children being admitted to hospital. Imagine if we'd delayed. In 2021, I expanded the ULEZ to the north and south circular. Also, people were saying to delay. We've seen a further reduction in nitrogen dioxide by 21%, but also children going to 1,400 schools.
You're quite alone politically, aren't you? Because Keir Starmer is worried about the impact on the by-election that's been in South Ruislip, aren't they? So there's a concern that you're out there on your own with with an agenda which is praiseworthy, but also might damage votes at the next election and damage livelihoods now.
Yeah. Well, let me just finish. So there's been calls to delay all 4 iterations of the ULEZ. Because we've taken action, we've seen the progress in London. But let me be quite clear in relation to the issue of delay. We know the evidence of consequences of air pollution. We know there's a policy that is a game changer in reducing air pollution. I think to stand idly by would be wrong. And I'll be quite clear in relation to the public health benefits of our policy, but also the adverse consequences of air pollution. And by the way, if you're driving a non-compliant car, you're breathing in the toxins and reducing your life expectancy. If you've got 2 kids in the back, it's affecting them as well. So actually, this is a policy which the government would be supporting by giving us financial support to give more people in the home counties that support they need.
But why do you say that anti-vaxxers, COVID deniers, conspiracy theorists and Nazis are part of the campaign against ULEZ?
Well, I went to a People's Question Time in Ealing, and outside that question time, there were lots of decent Londoners and those outside London who had concerns around the ULEZ. But I also saw banners, and you can't deny what you see on a banner. Banners outside People's Question Time, people latching on to the genuine concerns.
But you understand the basic concern, do you, from people, the ordinary people who are not the Nazis and the rest?
Oh, listen, I've been responding since I first made the announcement. Evidence of that is we've had after I announced the scheme in November last year. In January, the biggest scrappage scheme this country's ever seen, without a penny of support from the government, supporting in particular low-income families, those who are disabled, charities and micro businesses who employ less than 10 people. Because I'm listening to the concerns you referred to, in July, we said every single family in London who receives child benefit, more than 800,000 families will receive financial support. And because I'm listening, I've announced a further expansion of the scheme with more financial support, £160 million now. Yes. So every single person in London who may have a non-compliant car, motorbike, van or minibus receives support. But the good news...
Is it enough, though, £2,000?
Well, here's the good news. The good news is, firstly, 9 out of 10 cars seen driving out of London are compliant. around half of London households don't own a car. 70% of the lowest income households don't own a car. But I checked with Auto Trader last week. They've got about 5,000 cars for sale, all MOT'd, all road taxed for less than £2,000. And the week before, there were 6,000. The week before that, there were 5,000. There are cars available. I'm not saying, by the way, you've got to buy a new car or an electric car. What I'm saying is, look, if you want to be driving in London, it's important to be cognizant and aware of the consequences of you driving a non-compliant car.
The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, gets a hard time for getting a helicopter around the place, and you get to work in a high-spec Range Rover. What is the impact of you or ULEZ, or are you not affected at all by it?
Well, I've come today using public transport like I do most days. I walk, cycle, use public transport wherever I can, but also I'm somebody who, like the Prime Minister, has police protection. He rides the helicopter because, for other reasons, not because he needs police protection.
Well, he's busy.
Well, so am I.
Yeah,
and by the way, so is Prime Minister Blair and Prime Minister Brown and Prime Minister Thatcher. I didn't see them riding a helicopter, enjoying themselves like the Prada Sunak does.
Okay. Is this a precursor to a paper mile scheme?
No, not at all. Let me be quite clear about this mischief put out by the Tories. Look, it's no secret that this government, the former mayor, TfL, and so forth, have been looking into the issue of, road user charging. And there's the main reason why they've looked at smart technology is because the revenues raised from fuel goes down. And so when Boris Johnson, remember him? When Boris Johnson was mayor, his mayor's transport strategy talked about road user charging. When Rishi Sunak was Chancellor, he asked his officials in the Treasury to look into a national road pricing scheme. Let me be quite clear, as long as I'm mayor, there will be no,
And the next term as well, both if you win in May?
As long as I'm mayor, there's no paper mile scheme. But the government are looking into this for the reasons I've said.
And would you apologise for the upheaval caused by today? There's lots of concern about that out there, about this extra charge to get to work.
I've spent most of this morning with health experts, paediatrician, a GP who works and runs a health clinic with a bereaved mum who lost her daughter directly because of air pollution, and many others. They were tearful when they were telling me how grateful they were for the fact that after today, 5 million more Londoners will be breathing cleaner air. I'm going to carry on listening, though, to those Londoners who've got concerns around the ultra-low-emission zone expansion. And the evidence from the Central London ULEZ, the Inner London ULEZ, is I continue to review, monitor, and support more Londoners if they need it.
And just finally, do you think one day people will thank you for this? That even your critics today will say, actually, Sadiq Khan did a good job there.
Well, there's been lots of people today who've been thanking me.
But even critics, the ones who are concerned, will they thank you one day?
Well, I remember as an MP, and I know you were in the lobby, in 2006-07, when the Labour government banned smoking in enclosed public spaces. You'll remember the noise being made then, and now people wouldn't think about reintroducing smoking in pubs. You study history, in the 1950s, a brave Tory government passed the Clean Air Act, which meant power stations were removed from the centre of our cities. Battersea Power Station, what is now the in the middle of the 19th century, the Great Stink. Open sewers led to thousands of deaths by cholera. People weren't grateful then to the sewers. When it comes to tackling public ill health, I think you've got to take bold action. But also when you recognise that actually between 2017 and 2026, the NHS will spend £1.6 billion treating people in hospital. By 2050, that's going to be north of £10 billion. This policy will save lives and save money.
Sadiq Khan, thank you.
Well, there you go. That's Sadiq Khan explaining himself when it comes to why he's expanding what we call ULEZ, the ultra-low emission zone here in London. I've got to say, it's a huge expansion and it really has divided people. Some people say, yes, this is a great health policy. Other people saying it is basically using motorists as an ATM. Lots of you are asking, challenging Sadiq Khan about why does he declare opponents to this scheme as things like Nazis. He says then it's because it's what he's seen on banners outside when he did a People's Question Time. That sounds a bit weird to me. Just because someone writes something on a banner that you don't like doesn't make them a Nazi. This word just gets confetted around. It becomes absolutely meaningless over time when it becomes a standard insult. He also, did you notice then he was calling him Prada Sunak? I find that a little bit pathetic as well. You're not 12. I do think you need to communicate as a grown-up. A couple of things that I didn't get answers to. If air pollution is indeed so bad, this is the bit, and maybe I'm just being thick, but I cannot get my head around it. If air pollution is so bad, why are you allowed to do it? As long as you pay for it, then.
So, first of all, that's not true. I mean, he talked in that interview as if the moral high ground wasn't just his. He was talking from the top of Everest. I've looked at DEFRA's latest figures on emissions in the UK, and we are from the 1970 level down 98% on sulphur dioxide. We're down more than 3/4 on nitrogen oxides, and between the two kinds of particulate matter, which people talk about a lot, we're between those two figures. The direction of travel is clear. It's already going down hugely. We've never had cleaner air, particularly because, of course, our predecessors before the combustion engine were burning all manner of stuff in the capital. So we've never had cleaner air than we have now. So his premise is untrue. But his second premise is untrue because he says it's not a money-making exercise. If that were the case, the money from fining people, which is what this ULEZ thing is, the money from fining people would go into the scrappage scheme. But it doesn't. It goes to Transport for London, all £1.5 billion of it or whatever.
I 100% agree with you. It's a money-making exercise, £2.5 million a day. And he reminds me of Secretary-General of the UN, Guterres, who said we're no longer in a global warming situation, we're in a global boiling situation. When people exaggerate the dangers, and there isn't a huge danger with this either way, it's not going to make a blind bit of difference. I don't want to be cynical, but he doesn't care about green issues or anything like this. It's a money-making exercise. When people exaggerate and try and scaremonger, they actually undermine their own argument. That's what he's doing.
I couldn't agree more. And two final things. He couldn't be more insulting to the people who happen to disagree with him. Calling people Nazis, Keir Starmer will have his head in his hands. You're so insulting to people they want to vote for them. And the second thing for me about the way he just held forth is that in the end, if it's not about the cash that he's talking about, then you could show a bit more sympathy and empathy to the working class people who are going to have their vehicles taken away from them.
Exactly.
It shows how far Labour's lost their roots.
And what he's doing is he's hitting the small businesses, the plumbers, the electrician. They are the heartbeat of the economy. They actually contribute more than big business. You have to help them. You have to encourage them. What he's doing is charging them £12.50 a day from somebody who lives in Reading to go into work in Heathrow Airport. It's absolutely outrageous. He's the worst ever mayor.
He's a terrible mayor, and it is the reason that they lost the Uxbridge by-election. And Starmer wants to heed it. He doesn't.
You say he's a terrible mayor, by the way, but he's been re-elected again. So obviously a lot of people out there completely disagree with you and think he's doing an awesome job and back his policies.
People are entitled to vote their way they wish. But let me give you just one other telling thing, which I thought was a charity called Car for Ukraine, which wants to take some of the 4x4s that are going to get binned under this scheme and send them to the Ukraine for help. They said
Quickly
no.
on the screen, I'm going to show you where clean air zones currently are, or they're being planned. This is not just a London thing, as I said, but in London, £224 million was raised from ULEZ in 2022. A couple of big questions for me, still not answered. One, if pollution is so bad, why are you letting people do it as long as they pay? And two, if you're really concerned about air pollution, why aren't you starting right under your nose and getting into the underground? When you travel on that thing, about 5 million people, 5 million journeys a day on the London Underground, you get a tissue, you wipe the inside of your nose and you wait and see the state of it.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get